This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter and far more dangerous. For decades, American power has relied on a simple assumption that if you delay long enough, the system blinks, that courts move slowly, that consequences arrive late, if at all. Tonight, that assumption cracked. Not loudly, not theatrically, but procedurally. Somewhere deep inside the machinery of government, a clock started running that does not care about elections, approval ratings, or television narratives. A clock that cannot be filibustered. A clock that does not negotiate. And when that clock starts, everything else rearranges itself around it. If you're watching this right now, you're ahead of the story. Most people won't realize what shifted until it's already irreversible. That's why staying here matters. Because this isn't about what just happened. It's about what the system is no longer able to stop. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. So let's talk about who, or rather what, is actually in control now. What's controlling the system now is not a person. It's not a party. It's not even politics. It's timing. For a long time, power learned how to survive by slowing things down. Delay the hearing, appeal the ruling. Run out the clock, let public attention drift. That strategy worked because every major institution moved at roughly the same speed. Slow courts, slower Congress, fast news, short memories. But that balance no longer holds. Right now, one part of the system is moving faster than the rest. Not emotionally, not rhetorically. Procedurally, when legal processes accelerate, they don't argue, they don't persuade, they don't wait for permission. They create facts on paper, records, deadlines. And once those exist, everyone else is forced to respond, whether they're ready or not. That's the shift. Control no longer comes from commanding the narrative. It comes from who sets the clock. And the clock suddenly is not political. That's where the real danger begins. Because this wasn't supposed to happen quickly. And what happens next only makes sense once you see how slowly it started. For a long time, the change happened quietly. So quietly that most people didn't notice it at all. There was a before, and there is a now. Before, defiance looked dramatic. A speech, a headline, a rally. And the system responded slowly, carefully, almost politely. Now, defiance looks boring. Paperwork, filings, missed deadlines, ignored instructions. That's the danger. Because the most destabilizing shifts don't announce themselves. They normalize. Each small violation teaches the system a lesson. Not about right or wrong, about tolerance, what will be enforced, what will be ignored, what can be delayed one more time. And over time, that recalibrates everything. Judges issue warnings instead of consequences. Institutions hesitate instead of acting. The public gets used to escalation as background noise. Until one day, the system realizes it has trained itself into a corner. Slow erosion is more dangerous than sudden collapse. You can't mobilize against what feels incremental. You can't panic over what looks procedural. But once the line finally hardens, it hardens all at once. And that's when the first visible shock arrives. The shock didn't arrive as chaos. It arrived as paper, a formal step, filed, stamped, timed. On its surface, it looked technical, a response to repeated violations, a procedural escalation, but that framing misses the point. Because this wasn't punishment, it was transmission. A transfer of gravity from one institution to another. What mattered wasn't the language alone. It was where it landed. And what it forced into motion. Suddenly, actions that had lived in the abstract were pinned down, numbered, documented, sequenced. Warnings became records. Behavior became evidence. Delay became impossible. And once that happened, everything else began to move, whether anyone wanted it to or not. Political actors didn't react because they were convinced. They reacted because the room changed. Silence became risky. Waiting became visible. Neutrality stopped being neutral. That's why the response looks so fast. Not because people suddenly decided, but because the system removed their ability not to. This was only the first visible break, and it exposed something far more dangerous beneath it. Here's the part most people never see. The system doesn't run on outrage. It runs on handoffs. One institution applies pressure, another absorbs it, a third is forced to respond. That's how accountability is supposed to work. Slowly, deliberately, with friction. But friction disappears when defiance becomes repetitive. Every ignored order creates a choice. Enforce it or tolerate it. Each time tolerance wins, enforcement becomes harder next time. Until enforcement stops being optional, at that point, the damage no longer lands on the person breaking the rules. It lands on the system that failed to stop them. So the system adapts. It stops warning. It stops negotiating. It stops signaling patience. Instead, it converts behavior into evidence. Evidence into records, records into obligations. And once obligations exist, institutions no longer argue about whether to act. They argue about how fast. That's the hidden mechanism, not justice versus politics, but accumulation versus denial. Those who benefit are the ones who can't be delayed anymore. Those who absorb the damage are everyone who built power on waiting. And that imbalance is now irreversible, which is why the next shock doesn't arrive quietly at all. Now everything speeds up. No speeches, no explanations, just movement. Security shifts. Schedules compress. Statements appear faster than they can be processed. What felt abstract suddenly becomes logistical. Barricades, deployments, closed perimeters, not because anyone wants panic, because institutions plan for patterns, not intentions. And the pattern is escalation. Every response triggers another reaction. Every signal is read as pressure. Every pause looks like weakness. There is no single decision driving this. That's what makes it unstable. Multiple systems are acting at once, independently, legally, irreversibly. When that happens, coordination disappears. Control fragments. People start moving not because they agree, but because not moving becomes the riskiest option. This is where miscalculation lives, not in anger, in timing. Because when systems accelerate together, they don't slow down for clarification. And once momentum replaces deliberation, the next consequence arrives before anyone can stop it. This is where it reaches you, not abstractly, not symbolically, directly. When systems accelerate, they don't just pressure institutions. They compress lives. You feel it in uncertainty, in the constant sense that something is about to break, but hasn't yet. In the way normal routines start to feel provisional, rules change faster than explanations. Outcomes arrive before understanding does. That's when trust erodes. Not because you stop believing in anything, but because you no longer know where stability lives. You're told to wait, to stay calm, to let the process work. But the process no longer moves at a human pace. Decisions are being made upstream, far from where their consequences land. And you absorb the shock without ever being asked. That's why paying attention matters now. Not casually, intentionally, because disengagement doesn't protect you from systemic change. It just blinds you to it. If this feels heavy, good. That means you're tracking reality, not noise. And what comes next makes it impossible to pretend this is contained. What started as internal pressure doesn't stay internal for long. Systems leak. When one major institution accelerates, others feel the vibration, allies notice. Markets notice. Adversaries notice, not because they're watching personalities, because they're watching reliability. Stability is a signal. So is disruption. Suddenly, decisions made elsewhere get delayed. Commitments get hedged. Assumptions get recalculated. This isn't about optics. It's about risk. When a system shows it can no longer contain its own stress internally, everyone outside adjusts accordingly. Quietly, strategically, that's when uncertainty spreads faster than facts. What used to feel domestic now feels exposed. What used to feel managed now feels provisional. And no one knows how long this phase lasts, because there is no historical template for synchronized acceleration across institutions like this. The danger isn't collapse. Not yet. The danger is drift. A slow loss of confidence that forces everyone to prepare for outcomes they hope won't arrive. And once that preparation begins, it changes behavior everywhere. Which brings us to the future not as prediction, but as pressure. From here, the future doesn't branch once. It splits three ways at the same time. The first path looks like adjustment. Institutions absorb the shock. Rules tighten. Timelines reset. The system bends, but holds. Nothing feels resolved, but something stabilizes at a cost that won't be clear until much later. The second path is erosion. No dramatic failure. No single breaking point, just fatigue. Processes continue, but legitimacy thins. Compliance becomes selective. Confidence drains quietly. Everything still functions, but nothing feels authoritative. And then there's the third path, rupture. Not chaos all at once, but a moment when acceleration outruns coordination. When legal action, political response, and public reaction stop lining up. When one move forces another before it can be understood. When restraint looks like weakness and speed looks like control. None of these paths announce themselves in advance. They overlap. They compete. The danger is assuming one will win cleanly, because systems under pressure rarely choose a single direction. They oscillate. And oscillation is where mistakes compound, which means the most important question isn't what happens next. It's how long the system can keep moving this fast without losing coherence. That question remains unanswered. And it won't stay that way for long. There is a temptation at moments like this to look for reassurance, for a landing, for proof that the system will naturally correct itself. This is not that moment. What you are watching is not resolution, it's exposure. A system revealing what it does when delay no longer works. When authority has to choose between acting quickly or losing relevance altogether, that choice doesn't end tension. It concentrates it, because once institutions learn they can move this fast, the old equilibrium is gone. You don't go back to pretending time is neutral. What comes next won't arrive with a headline big enough to explain it. It will arrive as a series of decisions that feel inevitable only in hindsight. That's why paying attention now matters more than reacting later. Not to pick a side, not to predict an outcome, but to understand the mechanism before it hardens into precedent. If you stop watching, you don't miss drama. You miss the moment when the rules quietly change. And the next time they move this fast, they may not slow down at all. Stay with this. Because the danger isn't over. It's just no longer hiding.